We talked about postmodernism in the last video, but in this video we'll be talking about modernism. As the word describes, postmodernism came after modernism, and it came as a response to modernism. As opposed to the idea of postmodernism, the idea of modernism revolves around the attainment of meaning or truth through rationalism. Now, the idea of post structuralism is a nihilistic response, which is the pursuit of eradication of meaning and attaining liberty, while the structuralism or modernism is the attainment of structure or a system through rationalism. Now, the idea of modernism is a global movement, particularly focused in the Western culture and society, and it started in the early 19th and the 20th century, and it was the main contributor to the rise of the industrial revolution and the development of science and technology. Now, the goal of modernism was to promote uniform linear development of the society, mainly using new models such as science and technology, but it was also integrated in modern art, which we'll talk about in the latter part of this video. Now, prior to this period was the Age of Enlightenment. Now, the idea of modernism views rationalism as the ultimate guiding tool for societies to progress. Now, in general, the past is generally viewed as a darker period in time. The people that lived during this time had not so good life, and life was in general more unorganized, chaotic, and unstructured. So that is the idea of modernism. Now, postmodernism, on the other hand, favors relativism over rationalism. Now, it is a nihilistic response, as we already discussed. Now, what it claims, what postmodernism claims, or what it critiques, is that the idea of modernism takes rationalism so far that the idea of attainment of the true meaning is simply unattainable and non-pragmatic. Now, that is why the idea of difference of thoughts and practice and beliefs in postmodernism is accepted and actually welcome, while in modernism the difference in, let's say, difference in thoughts or difference in approach or difference in practice is generally frowned upon, as I could say, because the idea of post structuralism, what it says is that there is no uniform truth. So you have your own meaning, and or you can attain your own meaning. So there is no such thing as one predominant or one dominant idea. Now, one of the major contributions of modernism, or one of the main factors, or one of the main things that happened as a result of modernism, was the separation of church from the state. Now, there is a famous German philosopher by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche, who actually famously quoted this line, which says, "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him." Now, what he's actually trying to say here is that the idea of integrating science, science, religion, and politics is it shouldn't be the case, because science should never be tainted by politics or by religion, and religion should not interfere in politics or civil disputes or civil aspects or in scientific aspects. So that is the idea of separation of church from the state. Now, we have Western cultures and Western societies being pushed towards secularism. Now, how can we observe these impacts in the day-to-day surroundings in our environment today? Now, that can be a question. So one way you can do is take whatever I just said as, let's say, principles, and observe the art in your local surroundings. Now, when I say art, I'm not just talking about art galleries and the museums and the paintings, but you can also look at the movies in your country or in your local language, or games if people make them, or photos, anything that is art. Okay. Now, the idea of modern art is mostly guided by rationalism and rationalistic subjects such as mathematics, and it usually focuses uh, on on new techniques and embracing the new ideas and ditching the old ones. It focuses on telling one single core message, while postmodernism is the what it tries to do is it has multiple interpretations. Now, what it's trying to say is that there is no such thing as one true way. Now, it is not necessary that that the new ways are better than the old. It is left for people to make interpretations, and it's different from contemporary art. Contemporary art is about the art that represents today. Modernism is known to have contributed several positive movements, such as when I say positive movements, uh, this can be perceived as negative by different cultures, but in general, at least by the society that it was introduced in. So for that society, a lot of positive things have happened, such as the development of individualism, or the development of the infrastructure in the places using science and technology has happened. But it has also paved way for a lot of things, of a lot of other things, such as materialism, and even and even communism, if you can think about it, because communism came as as a response that the idea of the idea of attainment of truth simply does not exist. So they created a new way called looking at the world in the way of as a battleground of power. So that is a response that communists gave, but that came as a result of structuralism. And now you know about how I understand or how I view these two subjects. But how do you make sense out of these two subjects? Now, or what do I actually view, or how do I describe myself? So the idea of systems thinking is that no, what you do is you take into account the thing and the relationship and everything, you study everything around it, and then you make value judgments out of it. So rationalism itself is a good thing so long as you don't take individual components and make that the or individual facts and make solely that itself as the guiding tool, or you don't take any or you don't take anything and everything and say that there exists no meaning. That's just nihilism. And nihilism, what it really if you want to talk about nihilism, actually nihilism by itself is a flawed concept, because um, there's a lot of idea that what postmodernism is trying to do is trying to play with language, and it's simply trying to eradicate meaning. But the way it's trying to do that is using language itself, and that's why it's actually a flawed. A lot of intellectuals critique this as a flawed concept, but obviously there might be some people who would say, hey, I'm a postmodernist. You just are framing it in a so different way. But here's what I will say. As somebody who's a systems thinker, what I would say is that I'm not exactly a postmodernist. The difference between a postmodernist and a systems thinker is this. Okay. The idea of a systems thinker is that you have to reconcile every individual fact with other ideas. Okay. Now let's say, for example, how does this idea relate to this? Now, if you really want to understand the nature of the world, you have to take off the veil and understand everything and anything together and reconcile all those facts. Now, if you put a veil upon every individual things, it will create paradoxes and it will create a conflicting worldview and something that creates a very weak and a false sense of worldview. And that's what I think it is. Now, the idea of in systems in systems thinking, what would happen is, let's say if you came across a fact, or if you did some research and concluded something, it says let's say that it was 100% true. Well, let's say that you research about turtles in a specific location. Well, guess what? You researched about turtles in a specific environment and in a specific setting. What it doesn't mean is so what it also means is that this fact may not be true to somebody else who's researching turtles in another location, because turtles can behave or look in a different way. Now, mangoes actually taste different in India and in Pakistan, and the reason is, oh, okay, I don't want to get into the reasons, but I think you can tell, right? So, um, but it's but because it is different, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. Okay, so as a systems thinker, you have to humble yourself down and say that I may not know everything, but it doesn't mean that what I know or what I know to be is true is wrong. Because some of the things we know can be true, but it's just that we don't know how true it is. What I mean is, you have to understand, okay, this is true with these set of actors or with these set of settings and in this environment. I hope that kind of makes sense. Now, that is not the same as saying, okay, well, there is no meaning. If you don't know, that's because there exists no meaning. So whether you research other things or not, it still doesn't make sense, because, well, if you found out something, well, it is filled with some bias, and therefore it simply doesn't exist if you have bias. Now, postmodernism also says that usually in modernism, you take your personal biases out of your research. But what postmodernism says is that biases also need to be integrated in your research or in your pursuit, because who is doing what he's doing, the biases also count. Now, the idea of both modernism and postmodernism is not completely wrong. And that's what I'm trying to say here, is that both of these ideas have an element of truth. The idea of postmodernism, that this world is incredibly complicated and that there are different ways of interpreting everything or anything, is actually true. But the solution it gives is nihilism, is incredibly flawed. And I would say a similar thing with modernism. It's just that, okay, well, there definitely exist benefits, or there definitely exist pragmatic solutions that came as a result of modernism, but it is not free from flaws, and these flaws would surface someday, and that's what I kind of feel like. So having these discussions are incredibly important. Now, how is this really useful to us as UX designers? Now, how is this useful to us as UX designers is that when you're trying to understand your users, you need to understand people's biases, you need to understand what they are connected and inspired by. So if you put a veil on anything and everything, or you put a veil on something that you consider as a sensitive issue, well, what's happening is that you're hiding, is that you're limiting your own research. So as somebody who's a systems thinker, you would not shy away from taking the veil off and discussing and researching things in as open in as openly as possible. Um, Now, as I said, as a systems thinker, your research is never complete. Or when I say never complete, it's very difficult to complete. So let's say, for example, you know about. Let's say if I say that I am a UX designer, I am not a complete UX designer because I don't know so many things that other designers know. But what I can do is I can learn from as many different perspectives as possible and construct a better view or a more complete view of UX designers or UX design and from different people, from different UX designers. That is the best thing I can do. Now, that does not mean that another UX designer living in another location is wrong, as I said. So I hope this perspective makes sense. Now, if I am not, as I said, the job is always incomplete, but that's what keeps you alive, or that's what keeps you going. Is that the work is never complete. You never know everything, so there's always work left to do, and there's always meaning to be found. And that is my idea of these concepts. I'm not again a philosopher. I'm a UX designer myself, but this is how I kind of understand. If you have a different view, or if you think that I made a mistake, put them in the comment section below. I'm pretty sure a lot of people, because these are controversial subjects, but I thought that these things should be discussed as openly for the reasons that I already talked about in this video. So, but yeah, be sure to leave your comments if you want to in the comment section below, or wherever you're watching this. Like this video and share this video with your friends if it helped you. And until then, guys, I should see you guys in another video very soon.